Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday, it is 3 p.m. ET, and that means you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15, going on 16 novels of suspense. My current book is One Wrong Word, which you see displayed on the door behind me, because that's what we do. We put up our books behind. But this is a very special time for Crime Time because we have a very special author today, one of my favorite authors of all time, the fabulous Kate White, who is here today to talk with us about The Last Time She Saw Him, her brand new psychological thriller. I can tell you, before we let Kate talk, I can tell you that this is a perfect Kate White novel with a totally relatable main character, totally relatable circumstance with a totally relatable dilemma. I was talking to another author today about beach reads, airplane books, vacation books, and how ridiculous we think it is to have that be a detrimental label. Beach read, airplane book, vacation book, that's what I want. I think that's means entertaining and irresistible and thought-provoking and something that you can talk about. So welcome, 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 Kate White. What do you think about beach book, vacation book, airplane book?
Oh, I'm thrilled because that's what I aim for. I'm not trying to, write literature. I would love to be Ann Patchett, but I'm not. But I feel like I have a certain knack for suspense writing, and I love doing it. And I love hearing someone say, like, if someone just said to me today, I read it on my flight from the UK, and I jumped up in my seat at one point, and people looked at me, and to me, that's like the perfect compliment.
I mean, I think a vacation book, airplane book, beach book, that means it's a total immersion novel, that you were just in it and it's entertaining and it keeps you turning the pages. Is that top of your mind, being entertaining and compelling as you're writing, or do you put that in sort of later?
Well, first, I just want to say, I think there's something you and I have in common. One of the things we have in common, besides being funsters, you said my character's relatable. We both write about women who are strong women. They have careers, and we don't write about train wrecks. And so I think that's always a starting point for me. But something has happened in their lives that throws them off balance. But yes, I start off with, unlike you, I'm a plotter to some degree. I know the inciting incident. I know who's going to die and why. And then the goal is, how do I craft the book so that you're reading it and you're hooked from the first chapter, and then you're really hooked from the inciting incident, and then you keep reading and you just move along. And that's, for me, a big part of the goal, to entertain, to keep somebody up past their bedtime, which I don't hate me, but I'm sure, like you, Hank, your novels do that, and we like doing that, even though it seems a little mean.
Well, I love doing that. And I love that that's exactly what you did to me with The Last Time She Saw Him. My husband said, you have to go to sleep. And I said, no, I just have to read a little bit more. I have to read a little bit more. And you write so gorgeously that it is absolutely irresistible. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in about 1 minute. I see Sherry Reebok, who's saying, I love the Bailey Weggin series. We'll talk about those. Randy Trent says hello from sunny Indiana. Beverly says hello. Emily says, love those bookshelves. Vicki Gregory says, glad to see you both. Shannon Hansen says, I've been wanting to read this book. Yes, indeed, Shannon Hansen. And you may be able to do that because, of course, at the end of the show, we're going to spin the wheel of fun. And Kate and Harper Publishing will give away one copy of The Last Time I Saw Him. Are you seeing this cover gorgeously? If you see that perfect Kate White setting, and we get that too as well. So let me stop talking and let you hear about Kate White's bio, and then we will give the stage to Kate. Kate White, as you know, is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of 10 psychological thrillers, including Between Two Strangers, The Second Husband, and the brand new The Last Time She Saw Him. In addition to writing standalone psychological thrillers, Kate is the author of 8 Bailey Wiggins mysteries, which you see, Kate, you have fans of Bailey on this broadcast right now. The most recent, Such a Perfect Wife, was nominated for an International Thriller Writers Award. Kate is also the editor of the Mystery Writers of America cookbook, which contains my recipe for turkey tetrazzini and Lee Child's recipe for
coffee. Making the perfect cup of coffee. I begged him for a recipe, and he said, I don't really have one. I said, well, reach her is always grabbing a cup of coffee, so you can tell us your recipe for a perfect cup of coffee.
That, and it's hilarious. It's the perfect child entry in a cookbook. No question about it. Let me quickly remind you, Kate is the former editor-in-chief of 5 major magazines, including Cosmopolitan for 14 years. Kate is also the author of several popular career books, including the groundbreaking Wall Street Journal bestseller, Why Good Girls Don't Get Ahead, But Gutsy Girls Do. I just love that. And it was absolutely, I mean, it's so critically important and so pivotal. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about this book, because I do see you're drawing on your own experiences in The Last Time She Saw Him. So again, we're going to give away, well, we're not, I'm keeping this book. Kate and her publisher are giving away.
I just happen to have a copy I can send to somebody. Yes.
And the rest of you, if you don't win, you know what to do. This book has been out for a week now. So run, or click to get your copy. But not right now, not until the interview is over. So Kate, welcome, and tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, it's the story of a career coach. And as you mentioned, I drew a little on my own experience writing about career success, but Catherine Reed, she's known as Kiki, is a career coach who bumps into her former fiance at a party in the Connecticut countryside. She called off the wedding, and there's an awkward meeting of the two of them, but she feels that he's forgiven her, that even though their brief encounter is bittersweet, she doesn't feel any animosity from him. But he leaves, and a few minutes later, there's a sound of a gun going off, and Jamie, her ex-fiance, is dead. And the police seem to think that that he took his own life. And Kiki is just overwhelmed with guilt and remorse. But before long, she begins to realize that he was murdered. And so a lot of what she has to do in the book, and it's difficult for her because she's his ex-fiance, so she has no agency or domain. And I've written a lot of books about people who realize someone they know, their mother-in-law, a friend was murdered. But I wondered, what would it be like if someone you no longer had domain in their lives was murdered? And Kiki keeps coming up against people who tell her, butt out. But she's determined.
Let me go back, because there's so much in this, and you're bringing up so many points that I want to talk to you about. Going back first to the idea of Kiki being his ex-fiance. And I was really intrigued by that, because I was thinking about the genre of domestic suspense and how that is about relationships. And it's often, a couple or someone who wants to be a couple or the breakup of a couple. And I'm not sure I've ever seen a novel written about someone who used to be a couple. Talk a little bit. I mean, that's really unique.
Well, I came up with the idea. A very close friend of mine for many, many years, she was involved with a guy who I liked so much. He was separated from his wife, getting a divorce. He'd been separated a number of months when she met him. And he began to realize his kids were not doing well, and he went back to the marriage. And it was devastating for my friend. And we periodically, when we Zoom with each other, because we live in different parts of the country, we'll say, God, whatever happened to him? And she, of course, lost track of him, and she married herself. And then one day she said to me, he died. She Googled him and he had died. And we talked about what it's like to have someone who you felt so connected with die, and you don't have any right to be at that funeral, to grieve, to write a note, anything like that. And it got me thinking, and that really led me to the idea of what if you lost somebody, and beyond that you realize this person was murdered, but you don't have agency. And I thought, I haven't seen that, and it's not something I've ever written about, so I was interested in playing with that idea.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it either. And it's fascinating because when we have a relationship with someone who we think we're in love with at the time, and you do such a good job of putting together, of showing us Kiki's relationship with him during the time they were together, always a little frayed around the edges, but
Yeah.
fine. And, when that person goes out of your life in a graceful kind of normal kind of seamless kind of way, that's one thing. And from time to time, you might wonder, whatever happened to Joe?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, when you find out that they died,
Ah,
it's like a chunk of your life changes, doesn't it? Because we always sort of imagine that they're going on in their parallel existence and your paths aren't cross anymore.
that's such a great point. I had something happen not long ago when I was on the email thread of going to a high school reunion, and I
Mm.
discovered this one boy. He was the only guy that ever asked me out in high school, and I didn't go out with him. I just, as much as I might have been desperate for a date, I didn't think it would be a good day, but he was a nice guy. And when I saw him on the list of deceased, I realized I just assumed all these people would live forever.
Yeah.
I didn't think I would live forever, but you just sort of think these people in a parallel lives from us, as you said, we don't expect them to be gone. And then you sort of see, oh my God. And I think that was what it was like for her to discover he's not in this world. And so I think, as so many of us marry later and we move around, and now we have access to Google, there's more of a chance that you have left people behind in your past, and you're going to be able to research and find out what happened to them. And sometimes it can be kind of a jolt.
But because you're Kate White and because you're not going to have to seamlessly vanish, this episode happens essentially right in front of Kiki. I mean, she is
Yeah.
there, and she is involved instantly and doesn't have time to muse about it. I mean, she can't regroup. She's thrown into the action. What was it like to write that? It happened so early in the book.
Well, I know you go through this too. I mean, even though sometimes I would like to warm things up a bit, we know today our readers want to be instantly drawn in. The first page is important. The first sentence is important, and certainly the first chapter. So you would better hustle and get some action going. So for me, I just knew when I wrote it that I needed to get some of that going. And because it starts at a party, I even put a prologue in just for readers to be aware early on that there's at least one murder in the book, and just always trying to up the suspense, because readers have even shorter attention spans. When we first started, how many books have you done now? 16?
Yeah, 16, working on
Yeah.
16. How about you?
I just handed in my 19th, and it's changed from the days that I started writing. It's gotten even more important to engage early on.
Well, they always say if the reader walks into a bookstore, opens the book, reads the first line, and at that moment might just say, no, I don't think so. This isn't for me. And we've all
Right.
had that blink reflex of instantly knowing, instantly making a decision based on nothing but, maybe 10 words. And that's terrifying for an author, isn't it?
Yes, I think, you want to say sometimes, just give me a minute more and maybe I can convince you. But covers are important, titles are important, all those things. And same thing when we're watching Netflix or anything that's streaming that's a thriller. I don't give them a lot of time to hook me.
It's interesting. My husband will read a book that he doesn't like just because he thinks that he says he's made a contract with the author. Starts the book, he's going to finish the book. And I wonder, all of you, whether you do this and whether you do this, Kate. I mean, Diane says, Kate, I love your books.
Oh, thank you, Diane.
And I won't. If I'm not enjoying a book from the beginning, I think, I'm sorry, this just isn't for me. It might be for someone else. It isn't for me, but I'm going to go on. What do you?
Well, have you changed with that? Because for me, years ago, I would read the book to the end, just like your husband. I felt, well, I've made a contract, and I love that phrase you used, because it wasn't about the money. It was, gee, I committed to this. But now there's just too much to do and too much to read and too much to watch that sometimes I decide I'm going to fish or cut bait here, and you had your chance and I didn't stay with it.
You had your chance. And I think that's so interesting, because that's top of mind for all of us in writing books like you do. I mean, the last time she saw him, from a craft point of view, and forgive me, but I do sort of deconstruct and dissect my pals' books. Everybody's books is there's not a moment that you can put this down. I mean, you just have to, there's a hook on every page, and you have to go forward and find out what happens. Is that fun for you to write such tense suspense?
Well, for me, it is enjoyable to try to do it. You know what helped me a little bit? I'm curious. I'm sure we have some Nancy Drew fans today. And when I decided that I was not going to die without writing a suspense novel, something I'd always wanted to do, and I started to do it, I went back and I read a few Nancy Drews, because I remembered that I would always keep turning the pages. And it was fun to see some of those chapter endings, because they would always end with, "Look out, Nancy," George shouted as the boat, headed in their direction. And
or you can't believe what I just found.
Right, exactly. So I learned a little something from good old Nancy Drew books.
Great.
That we know weren't written by Carolyn Keene. And oh gosh, remember when you found out there was no Carolyn Keene?
There is a Carolyn Keene, whether it's Helen Stratemeyer or whoever it really is.
Yeah.
The spirit of Carolyn Keene, because what a wonderful name that has been. And let me just welcome Diane Dix says, I love your books. Emily says, prologue always draws me into the story. And Emily also is asking, how did authors come out with book titles? Let's talk about that at the end.
Yeah.
Remember that question. Sharon Bishop says, I have trouble DNRing a book. I feel like I need to give the author a full chance to catch my attention. We love you.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Sharon. Sharon, that is so good to know, because
so good to know.
Yeah. Well, for titles, sorry, Hank.
No, I'm just saying Susie Baldwin says she's a Nancy Drew fan too. And Kim says, I grew up on Nancy Drew. Emily says, Nancy Drew is always my favorite. Thank you. That is great. Anyway, Nancy Drew digression. So go ahead, Kate.
With titles, I'm curious where your headset is about this today. I used to go for titles that were clever, I thought. Like If Looks Could Kill, it was the first Bailey Weggins, and she worked at a magazine that covered a lot of fashion and beauty. So that seemed to be, a cute way of titling that book. And the second one had to do with death at a spa. So that was called Body to Die For. And so it didn't necessarily totally sum up the story, but it was something that was clever and might draw you in. But in the last number of books, I've really been interested in doing titles that are the story kind of in a microcosm, or at least relate very closely to the story. And with this one, because Kiki begins to realize that Jamie, her ex-fiance was murdered. He was murdered 5 minutes after leaving this party that they were at, kind of a dinner party for about 35, 40 people. She thinks a lot about the last time she saw him. What was he saying to her? Did he seem at all, as if something was going on, preoccupied?
And she asked people, what did he say to you? Did he seem upset or distressed?
Right.
And that's sort of, and your title, you're so clever, is that your title is exactly what happens in the book. It's sort of reconstructing what that moment really was, which seemed like it was an ordinary moment until
right, just maybe a bittersweet moment, but now it becomes important for her in trying to figure out how he died and who could have killed him. So that's kind of where I am now. Some of your titles, I mean, certainly like The House Guest, that right away, as soon as I saw that, before I even read it, I have an idea.
Yes.
I know who she is. I know what she's doing. And yeah, others of yours have been a little bit more on the clever side. Where do you fall with your titles right now?
I do think that what works, and I think what works perfectly in The Last Time She Saw Him, and what works in One Wrong Word, for instance, or in The House Guest, is that there's something has happened. Something has changed in someone's life, and the reader wants to know what that is. So what happened the last time she saw him? What's the story that's there? And there clearly is one. In One Wrong Word, what wrong word? What did somebody do that made everything go wrong? And in your titles and in mine as well, there are layers of meaning of what that. I want to go on a little bit because one of the great themes in your novel that you handle so gorgeously is the theme of guilt and how people behave when they feel guilty about something, and even if you can't quite figure out what it is. Can you talk a little bit about that thread that runs so gorgeously through the book?
Well, in some ways, Kiki's almost ashamed of herself for the part of her that's driven to prove he was murdered, because then that takes the guilt away from her, because she knows, I don't know how I can go on living my life if there's reason to believe that Jamie took his own life because he could not get beyond the grief of us breaking up. So guilt's a funny thing. There's certain feelings we have, envy being one too, that we try to tamp them down because they're so ugly. But I guess if you can look at them and realize what's going on, we develop as human beings. And with envy, it's what's that saying about what you want? And with guilt, it's like, what's it saying about what you should have done or could have done? And can you learn from it? And I think certainly Kiki, her whole experience in the book in some ways does become a learning experience, trying to understand better why she broke off the engagement and all those things. And so that's something you try to do too. Even though it's a thriller, you want your character to make some progress during the book.
Sure. And it's handled so beautifully because she can't decide whether she really is guilty of something. Maybe what happened had nothing to do with her. And one of the problems that we all run into in books like this, where there is a person who is not a detective trying to solve a mystery, is why would they do that? What is the impetus for them to try to solve a crime? And I do think the other thing that you do so wonderfully in this book is that she has this motivation, and yet she's thwarted. Oh, my light just went out. She has this motivation, and yet she's thwarted almost because she's a woman, almost because she's an amateur. She's dismissed by people for following up.
Right. She's dismissed. And also it's because you have no right. You ditched him. You ditched him practically at the altar. So that makes it hard for her. And there are moments where she feels like she's getting close to proving he was murdered, and then she has a setback, and each time that happens, the guilt comes back because it's like, maybe this is all because of me. So she's definitely wrestling with those things as she tries to dig for the truth.
It's great too because she's a career counselor, as you have
Yeah.
been in some ways, and it's you have sessions that she has with people who have nothing to do with the story itself, but have to do with her. And talk a little bit about why it's important. And also, I have to say, I'm thinking about this now. When she talks to other people, we realize that she may be using the skills that she has, that she teaches other people in how to deal with people. Was that fun to write? And talk a little bit about why you decided to make her a career counselor.
Well, you're so good too in your books about bringing in your career in a lot of the books. And I feel like for me, I read one book once about somebody who was an editor, a magazine editor, and the person who I've never met this author, but she did a really bad job at it. And readers are really forgiving, aren't you? Readers, you're forgiving, right? And you allow for some poetic license, but it bothers me to get too much wrong. So I've tried with my protagonists to have them, like Bailey Weggins. She is a true crime writer for magazines for years, and now a website because magazines are dead. And with career coach, I felt I knew enough about writing about career success, and I'd interviewed enough career coaches, and I interviewed a few more for the book. I felt I could write about it and get it right. The one thing about Kiki is that she has a certain skill of being able to look at somebody's career and help them strategize, but she even points out that she hasn't always been so great at that herself. And there's times in the book where maybe just because of her own, the guilt, the grief, the anxiety about what's going on, that she doesn't do as good of a job as she would have advised somebody else to do in the situation. But I did enjoy talking to those career coaches, and I learned a couple things that I had that were reinforced for me that I've forgotten about. And one of them is she tells this young guy who's just a real jerk of a client, his parents are paying for the sessions. And there's not a lot about it in there, but a few things, because she is working from home and she's up in Connecticut and she's got to do this. But she tells him, and a guy I used to work with who was in charge of recruitment of like top editors and stuff, said that one of the biggest mistakes people make in a job interview is they're trying to be so buttoned up that they come across as too cool. And he said, you want to show your enthusiasm. And he recommends you always should sit just a little bit on the edge of your seat. So maybe I should move forward a little bit. I guess I'm talking to you.
I remember that scene because she gets so dismissed by that suggestion when obviously it is a good suggestion. And I really love that undercurrent. And I love that you make Kiki have battles in her own professional life that she's having to fight, financial and professional battles that she's having to fight while she's trying to figure out what the heck happened to these people who she cares about. I love the Kate White settings. Your settings are always beautiful, gorgeous houses and dinner parties and country. Talk a little bit about why you do that.
Well, I live in New York City, so a lot of my books are set here. And I have been lucky enough to be invited to a few good dinner parties. With this book, I set in Litchfield County, Connecticut, where my son lives. So I'm familiar with that area. And he doesn't go to dinner parties like the opening one, but I thought her former boss would have something a little bit like that. It's not super posh, but the guys are in navy blazers and the women are in Eileen Fisher clothes, and a little touch of sophistication there.
And it's so much fun to read. It's also fun to read about how careful and caring you are about food. People always have just the right food. People are always taking care of each other or themselves with providing just the right food. And that's so realistic.
Well, I just love food, and I'm a very active cook, and I realize like maybe I'm talking about food too much. And my editor wrote in the margin one time, but what did she have for dinner? I thought, I can't get away from it. But I guess I'm just a foodie. Not that I'm, great at it, but I love to eat.
Well, it makes people be very realistic when you talk about food. Vicki says, enjoy books that include food.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you.
It's not artificial food. And I don't mean to be clinical about this, but when Shannon says, I want to curl up and read it now. Yes, indeed. By Kate White. When people do things that people really do, like be hungry and go to the grocery store and cook, it makes them appear to feel like real people to us. And Kiki is a marvelous character. How was she born in your head? What did you start with her? Did you name her first?
Well, can I just say one thing about the food is that I also think it says something about character. Like in my last book, the Between Two Strangers, the main character, Skylar, is a bit of a curmudgeon, and she eats peanut butter sandwiches sometimes. Where with Kiki, she's sophisticated. She's in her late 30s, almost 40s. So when she goes to the gourmet food store, she's going to buy some shrimp salad and stuff like that. So to me, it kind of helps set somebody up. For Kiki, one thing I did try to tap into, she had a professional setback in her 20s that really knocked the wind out of her sails. And that kind of happened to me too. I came to New York. I had been on the cover of Glamour, and I had had a certain amount of success in college. But New York sucked every bit of confidence out of me when I got here. It's just such an overwhelming city, and I was from such a small town. And I tried to tap into that for Kiki, what it's like to think, hey, I'm going to go to this town. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be like those old Mary Tyler Moore shows. And instead you find yourself with your confidence really kicked to the curb. And so Kiki has to reflect on that, because she's come back, but it took her a while to get that confidence back. And I did tap into some of my own experiences for that.
That's so revealing. I mean, first of all, I have to say there is no one else who has ever said to me, I was on the cover of Glamour. I mean, that's just a line that you don't generally hear, first of all. And I wonder, I imagine gorgeous you, glamour girl, cover girl, coming to New York and being overwhelmed by that. But don't you think, or do you think, that helped you to be this fabulous person that you are now? That couldn't have happened without that.
That's so great of you to say. And by the way, my brother's called the cover trick photography.
Fine.
I think what it helped me to see is, as I struggled, to step back and ask myself, hey, what do you want? Are you going to, there was one moment where I thought, I'm going to go and live with my aunt and uncle in Connecticut and get a little job in that town. But I stepped back and said, what do I really want in life? And I did want a career in magazines. And so it helped me to think about what I needed to do to get my act together, that I needed to switch departments at the magazine I was working at and just set some clearer goals for myself instead of just floundering. So setbacks are good as long as you step back from them and ask, what's that setback telling me?
So you were your own Kiki at that point. Yourself your own career.
Advice, as you can see, even to myself.
Well, she's absolutely a great character. Was she always named Kiki, Kathleen?
Yes, I don't know why. I just found myself liking that name, Kiki, and with a full name, Catherine. Of course, the funny thing is, I'm Kathleen, nicknamed Kate, so maybe subliminally, I was getting close to my own name with that one.
It's funny, what my character in my Jane Ryland books, I knew her name was Jane the whole time, but I couldn't come up with her last name. I couldn't come up with her last name. And I honestly was on the train on Amtrak on the way to New York with the final version of the book to talk to my editor about it. And she still didn't have a last name. And we were going through Connecticut, and I said to myself, the next name I see, I'm going to look out the window, and the next name I see is going to be her name. And I saw the sign that said Ryland Industries. So I thought, Ryland. Yes, I love that name. So
it's such a perfect name for her too.
Well, thank you. But then what happened was, I put her name, I made that be her name. Everybody agreed, all the editors, all the agents, everybody agreed. And then in one of the first book events I had for the other woman, the first Jane Ryland thriller, someone said to me, "Why did you name her after yourself?" And I said, "Name her after myself?" And she said, "Yeah, her name is Ryland and her name is Ryan." And it never crossed my mind.
Oh my God. Yeah.
All those editors and all those people, nobody ever caught it, but a smart reader realized.
Yeah. It's funny because like you, I've done things where the first name I see in the New York Times today, that's going to be his last name. But sometimes your subconscious takes over and you go in a certain direction. And all of a sudden you realize, whoa, that's pretty close to so-and-so's name.
Yeah.
Have you found, Hank, where somebody thinks that you named a killer after them, but you based a killer after them or a bad person after them, but you really didn't, but they like to assume you did?
I know that they must, but I've never done that. Have you ever done that?
Yeah. Early on, someone said to me, "I know you named the killer after me." Two different people did that. And I was like, or you based her on me. No, that wasn't the case.
Oh, I mean, this is part of the mystery of writing and part of the mystery of creating a wonderful new world, which, Kate White, you do every time you write a novel. And we have gone way over our time yammering about whatever we're yammering about. Let me ask you one final question, and then we'll take quick questions from the audience. As a writer, I know sometimes you live in Uruguay and sometimes you live in New York. What do you like when you're writing? What kind of do you go in with joy and inspiration, or do you think, oh my gosh, another day? What's your writer personality?
Well, I go in just knowing I've got to do it and don't think too hard about it. And I enjoy it, but at the same time, it's challenging for me. And I think you admitted to me one time you sometimes use the Pomodoro technique, which I just swear by that. So I use a timer to force my butt in the chair. And what I love about Uruguay is that we're there almost 4 months in the winter. I don't have a lot of other obligations. So I don't have to look at my watch and go, I've got to get to the doctor. We have friends there, but I don't have doctors. I don't have other appointments. So it's pretty good at being almost like a writer's retreat.
Oh, that's perfect. Your own little writer's retreat. Win-win. Well, you certainly did a fantastic job with The Last Time She Saw Him. We're talking brand new from Harper Books, The Last Time She Saw Him by Kate White, a marvelous, fast-paced, propulsive domestic suspense thriller, which you will not want to miss. And it is a standalone, we should say, available right now. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience for the fabulous Kate White. Who has a question? How do you want, Sharon Bishop, what a good question. How do you want people to feel at the end of the novel?
At the end of this novel, I just would like them to feel the truth was arrived at. We all, what's that line from All the King's Men? Jack opened the envelope because the end of the man is to know. And I, not comparing myself to Robert Penn Warren, but you do want to know, and Kiki wants to know, and there's a satisfaction in the end to knowing that she knows.
And I think also one of the things that you do in your novels is that when the main character knows, it's fair and all the clues have been there and the reader understands why she got there. And we often think, oh, I should have seen that coming. I should have figured that out. I could have figured it out if I had just been as smart as Kate White. So there's a satisfaction with justice of whatever kind it is at the end of the novel. We know what happened.
Because I know you're fair to your readers too, and we try to be fair, some of us, because I hate when all of a sudden it's like this rabbit out of a hat.
Right. It's a Martian. It's a ghost. Twin brother. All right, we don't have that. So Emily says, have you already planned who's the murderer and who's the victim from the beginning of the book, or do you make changes as you write, or maybe a little bit of each?
Well, I do plot a little bit as I go, kind of 4 chapters at a time. But in the beginning, I always know who the murderer is, who the victim is, what's the inciting incident, and the big twist. And I know you're what's called a pantser, and you just figured out your characters lead you there. But maybe I'm too much of a Virgo that I have to know those things. So I do know those things always. And I've never changed it. I've never once said, you know what, I think I'm going to make somebody else the murderer. Never.
I'm a Libra, so that means like it could be this, it could be that. We're the perfect astrological authors. We have time for one more question. Kim says, who or what do you enjoy reading? Good question, Kim.
Well, I like to have 3 books going at one time. A nonfiction. I've just finished Cocktails with Martha and George about the making of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I'm reading Sapiens right now about how humans came to be. I like a literary novel, to me, someone like Ann Patchett, and I always have to have a mystery going. But I also like something. It's funny. I put this book on the table in case I needed any heft. But I know we have one person here who's a total Shakespeare person, Hank Phillippi Ryan. So love this guy too.
You can open it anywhere. I mean, what a genius. There's just no about storytelling and characterization.
You studied Shakespeare in college, right?
Yes, that was my major. And he did everything that we strive for every day is voice and character and motivation and suspense and everything. Yeah. We can yammer about this forever. Let's give away a copy of The Last Time She Saw Him. We're going to spin the wheel of fun, which we love, and Karen will draw for the winner. Is this not great? I really wish we had music. And the winner is Irma Flores Mangus. That's so marvelous. So nice that you won. Irma is such a devoted fan of Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and I am so thrilled that you won. Irma, you will get a notice of where to email me, and I will email our executive producer, who will email Kate White's people, and they will get you your book. So again, Irma.
I live in Las Flores in Uruguay, so that means a lot to me.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. And Kate, you're on book tour. Are you still on book tour for a while? And where can people find you?
Well, I have a few more stops in Connecticut, Avon, Connecticut, also Madison, Connecticut. And this Friday, I'll be at the bookshop in Frenchtown, New Jersey. So I do have a few more places. And you can go to katewhite.com and just check it out on the homepage if you want.
That'll be so much fun. I've been seeing your fabulous pictures of book tour, and it looks like you're having great fun and selling a lot of The Last Time She Saw Him and meeting a lot of fans. And that is always marvelous. Before I let you go, let me quickly tell you, our attendees, to stick around, because at 4:00 we'll have another interview. So go get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or some lemonade or whatever you want. You have 15 minutes to do it, and come back and we will talk to Catherine Mack, who wrote this hilarious book, Every Time I Go on Vacation, Someone. It's hilarious and wacky and unique, and we will talk to her in about 15 minutes. Meanwhile, Kate White's The Last Time She Saw Him is available right now, so you know what to do. Click, 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 run, run, run. Go get your very own copy of Kate White's brand new thriller. Kate, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Hank, so much. And I'll see you at Thriller Fest.
Yeah, we're both going to New York next week. I can't believe it's next week. And we'll finally see each other in person without the little boxes.
Of course, I am in New York right now. So I'll just be walking a few blocks to the Hilton.
And I'll be on Amtrak picking names from the billboards along the people there. Absolutely. All right, you all, thank you. It's been such a treat to see you all today. Shannon and Diane and Emily and Maria, Alicia, Susie Baldwin. Thank you so much, Irma. Congratulations again. And we will see you in 15 minutes right here with Catherine Mack. Until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time.